Good evening, everybody. Brian Neubert here from goldenblack.com. Live in the John Wooden room here at, see if you can guess what college campus I'm on right now. I'm in Mackey Arena, obviously, following Purdue's 83-64 win over Toledo to close non-conference play. This is your wrap video. Thank you to the Purdue Club Hotel for your support as always. I hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas or whatever it might have been. I hope you've got all the eggnog and over-processed sausage product from those pop-up mall kiosks, Pepperidge Farm, whatever it might be. I can't remember the name of the company. Out of your system now, and are ready to start being angst-ridden over basketball games again after the holiday. So it starts off now with the 83-64 win over Toledo. Purdue's last bye game of the year, Purdue's last non-conference game of the year. Purdue closes non-conference play here 8-3 in non-conference games, 9-4 overall as Big Ten play resumes. Big Ten play resuming with Purdue set up here for some early success, which would be very important in the big picture of its Big Ten championship aspirations. Its win total, which is not where it's been in past years. We've covered the reasons for that, why Purdue has played a really difficult schedule with a team that does have some limitations, does have some flaws, and really was overscheduled a little bit. You know, you got to project in some of these things, and I think some things have come to light about Purdue that, you know, you couldn't really foresee coming in terms of, you know, size, injury, a relative dearth of ball handlers, you know, things like that. But 9-4, you know, for a lot of people is a pretty good start by Purdue standards. Before, it's a little bit unfulfilling, but the best for this team, you know, very likely is to come. So we'll see how things play out from here, obviously. But I think Purdue's fine. I think Purdue's still a really good team. A perfect team they are not. But I think they're still a really good team, and I think they're, you know, very much still the favorites to win the Big Ten. I think they'll be a top 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. They'll win 20-plus games. Obviously, once again, although people now are kind of viewing Purdue in a way where 25 wins is sort of, you know, taken for granted. You know, Purdue may still get there, but you know, this season to date hasn't quite been the astronomical standard that Purdue has set the last couple of years. But as I said before, the best may be yet to come. I think they're fine, personally. Not fine by, like, elite number one in the country standards as they've been held to the last couple of years, but they're fine in terms of being on schedule to have a really, really good, if not borderline great season. It's just had some ups and downs thus far. But as I keep saying here, the best may be yet to come, for all we know. Mentioned some of the limitations on this team. I think that some of them were on display here in this Toledo game. You know, Purdue was not great rebounding. I think, you know, before the game, I didn't think Wilberg's absence. He's out with a sprained foot for at least this game. From here on out, I guess he'll be listed as day-to-day, so we'll kind of see. I didn't figure he'd play tonight anyway, because that's kind of where he's been in the mix here lately against opponents like this. But he would have played tonight. He would have been in the game in the last 5 minutes of that first half when Toledo was really going to the glass really hard and having a lot of success on the offensive glass and, you know, things like that. And I think his size and his presence would have mattered and would have been useful in a game like this. You know, that's not going to be an every game thing for him, but I think tonight he would have found a bit of a role here tonight. When you look at, you know, the competitive stretches of this game and why they occurred, and I don't want to say Toledo is, you know, just by game chum. I think they're a solid program that's having kind of a turbulent year. But when you look at their 18 second chance points and their 17 offensive rebounds, those numbers jump off the page at you. But I also think they are canceled out to a certain extent by Purdue getting 15 points in transition, which was in part a function of Toledo sending so many people to the glass. So those two things kind of go hand in hand. So they did kind of cancel one another out. So Purdue's vulnerability wound up being kind of canceled out and turned into a bit of a strength on the other end. If that makes any sense or not. I probably might be making too much of that. I don't know. But Purdue was out in transition quite a bit. Toledo at one point got back in the game with transition. Purdue separated itself again with transition. Purdue has been a pretty solid fast break team here lately. They've done a good job in transition. Having an elite point guard certainly helps. But I think they've got some guys who can run. I think they've done a good job on some long rebounds lately. They've done a good job just pushing tempo, circumventing whatever backcourt pressure people might want to apply. Toledo is not that type of team. But I think that they've done a good job as a fast break team, and I think that needs to be a consistent source of productivity for them. You know, we've talked before here about that kind of baseline of productivity you always got before. You could always count on Ross-Ade drawing 5 fouls in the first half, getting you to the bonus. Ross-Ade being good for 2 or 3 putbacks a game, which would be 6 points, if not more, with fouls and things like that. And you could always kind of count on that. That was always like your fallback foundation. And, you know, this Purdue team, with the flaws it has in terms of not having all that many ball handlers and right now not having a whole lot of size, could use that consistent bucket of output that probably can be construed a lot of different ways. So let's just forget I said that. But I think, you know, part of Purdue's winning calculus from here on out needs to involve a few baskets a game in transition, getting out in a fast break by any means necessary. I think that, you know, Toledo came into this game averaging only 9 turnovers a game, and that they've played Houston. The fact that they didn't turn the ball over 30 times against Houston I think, says something. Purdue got 14 turnovers off them. I think Purdue, part of that was Toledo, you know, being a little sloppy at times, but I think Purdue deserves more credit for forcing those turnovers than, you know, Toledo deserves blame for just throwing the ball away. I don't think that was really all that much of a part of it. I think Purdue did a decent job defensively. The issue was the rebounding. They were able to get a lot of offensive rebounds, a lot of second chance points. That's the most important part of defense, is getting the defensive rebound. So don't mistake me saying they were okay on defense, they forced turnovers, with the fact that they didn't finish a lot of those possessions with now some of those were long three-pointers and things like that. That's just going to happen sometimes. It is a round rubber ball, leather ball, whatever they're made of. It's full of air. It bounces funny sometimes. It's a game of angles. It's a game of deflections, and the ball doesn't always go right to you. So sometimes when you have a bad shooting team and they're chucking, which I think Toledo did at times, the long rebounds are going to go back to them. That was part of the issue with Purdue. Part of it was just being out physical. And we're talking about Purdue, as you can tell behind me. Purdue, the school of Ross-Ade and Caleb Swanigan and Travion Williams, et cetera, being out physical around the basket by Toledo. But that's just where Purdue is right now. They're playing they're playing a power forward at center, which is the best way to go because it's your best offensive lineup. They have 2 7-footers on their roster. One is out for the year with a broken leg. The other one is out tonight with a sprained foot and is a work in progress anyway. And that's almost 16 feet of center that you didn't have tonight. And the guys you're playing aren't the most physical guys in the world. Riley Burgess is probably going to be a very good player at Purdue. He's not ready to really impose his will physically on people. Had some balls taken away from him, got roughed up a little bit. He will get better, presumably, through the course of the season. he will really get better this offseason when he's got that opportunity to make that year 1 to year 2 jump after a summer in the weight room, which he very badly needs, as does Daniel Jacobson once he's got his leg right. Outside of that, you just don't have that physical presence around the basket. That's part of their limitations defensively from a rim protection perspective. It's part of their limitations from a rebounding perspective, and it's just something they're going to have to overcome. They're going to have to play that much better elsewhere to kind of make up for it. When you look at what they did in San Diego weeks ago over Thanksgiving, Purdue played really hard, and that's the reason they won that event. That's what Purdue is going to have to kind of get back to here. Not to say they've departed from it. I don't think anything would have mattered against Auburn. Texas A&M was, I can't say that was an effort issue by any means, but I think Texas A&M was better than Purdue in that game, and Texas A&M played harder than Purdue and things like that. But Purdue's got to be that team that 3 times out of every 4 games in the Big Ten plays harder than the other team, and they just scrap and fight and become that kind of grinder team that they showed flashes of being through non-conference play. There's still some unrealized upside to this team that they still have to kind of close those margins a little bit through improvement, through adjustments, however you want to define adjustments, but also through just effort and things like that, being more physical, everybody on the floor, not just the big guys, everybody on the floor. But they also need to balance things out a little bit. I've always said that people fixate on who's scoring and who's not scoring, and almost always it's not all that big a deal when somebody who's providing value in other areas isn't scoring. But Purdue gets, I can't do math at the top of my head this well, so I'm not even going to try. The overwhelming majority of its scoring from its big 3 of Braden Smith, Fletcher Loyer, and Trey Kaufman-Rand, you can win that way as long as some other things around it fall into place. Purdue can't turn the ball over. Purdue can't get clocked on the boards. And some of these other guys need to make threes, because the way people are going to guard Braden Smith and the way people are going to guard Trey Kaufman-Rand, somebody's got to make them pay. And the guy you're helping off, I don't want to say the guy who's unguarded, but the guy who's going to have a little extra room on the wing to get threes off, got to make them. Have to make enough of them to burn people for the extra attention they're going to spend on Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Rand. And when you get into those advantageous situations, when people, I wrote about this before the game, when people trap the ball out of Braden Smith's hands and all of a sudden they've got 2 guys on 1 Purdue guy, and then you've got 4 guys now playing against 3 guys, somebody's got to make plays in that situation, and somebody's got to take command of that 4-on-3 game and really make people pay and really balance this out a little bit. It's not a matter of what the scoring distribution looks like at the end of the game. It's a matter of how the scoring distribution affects how Purdue is playing and how opponents are playing against Purdue. That's the important part of this, is when someone's conceding to you a certain guy on offense to get him a couple of open threes here and there, you got to make those, or you got to make the right play off of those opportunities. Miles Colvin, Camden Heide, whoever it might be, need to make those shots, or they need to make that next pass when somebody's scrambling to get back to bases that can't be covered by the number of people being asked to cover them. So that's a convoluted explanation here of the offensive dynamic I think Purdue's dealing with from an offensive balance perspective. But at the end of the day, Purdue's got 3 really good offensive players. And how many schools in the country have 3 really good offensive players who'd be the leading scorer on a lot of different teams? Trey Kaufman-Rand's leading Purdue in scoring. Braden Smith just got 34 and 12 assists and 3 steals. Made 6 threes. Anyway, I think part of Braden Smith's game tonight was anger. I think that, he doesn't take losing very well. And by Purdue standards, having 4 losses to this point is not what these guys are used to and not what they expect. And I think he came out probably with a chip on his shoulder. He probably wasn't very jolly during the holidays, shall we say. I'm not sure I've ever seen him jolly or merry, especially merry. Some people merry just doesn't work for. I happen to be one of them. Braden Smith strikes me as someone who's very rarely merry. After wins, he can probably be somewhere close to merry. Maybe jovial would be the next step before merry. I don't know. Certainly not jolly. But I think that he was, frustrated probably by some of the struggles Purdue's had against, again, Purdue played really good teams. They struggled with a certain type of matchup. And I think this was more about the opponents than it was about Purdue. Nevertheless, whatever the circumstances may have been, that might have warped people's perception of what this Purdue team is. That is a very good, if not, certainly not perfect team. I think Braden Smith kind of came out here tonight and took it out on Toledo. Also, the way Toledo defended in terms of switching onto Braden Smith with people he had real advantages against, but just the way you saw him attacking those switches struck me as a guy who's just pissed. He is not a guy who's always going to want to come out and take 25 shots. It's just not what he's been as a player his whole life. He has always fancied himself and backed it up as a pass first point guard. I've seen him do this in grassroots, high school, whatever it might be, where you wonder what's going on with this guy. Why isn't he just taking this game over? Because he can. And he eases into the game by getting his teammates involved and, things like that. But that time would come where his team needed him to take the game over. And he would. I saw it happen a half a dozen times before he got to Purdue. I've seen it happen at Purdue where he just flips the competitive switch and just starts scoring and just takes over a game. And there are going to be games where that's going to be the case for him at Purdue this year. Again, there have been a couple this year. Creighton, which obviously didn't count. This game today was one of them. I can't remember the other one. It doesn't matter. But he's capable of doing this depending on the circumstances of the game. Traycoff-Moran's capable of putting up the numbers he's putting up. He can get 25 any given night. Fletcher Lawyer is a guy who's going to win games for you with his shooting at times, and he's going to make the right play 90% of the time. And he's had a really good year. He blends in sometimes. He blends in because you take him for granted, because he's just rock solid and generally pretty efficient, and you take him for granted. But he is a really good player, and on a lot of teams in college basketball, he'd probably be your guy. He'd be the guy you run 8 plays a game for, the guy who, is your top scorer or your 1A to 1B level scorer, the guy who's got the ball in his hands twice as much as he does at Purdue right now because they have to play through Braden Smith and Traycoff-Moran so much, and obviously last year had to play with Zach-Edey so much, but he's, again, a really good player. But you need some of these other guys to make them better. That's kind of the name of the game. You need some of these guys to be grinders, to be rebounders, to be garbage point guys, to be out in transition, to be really active, and to make open threes. And that's kind of where Purdue is right now. The lights are fading on me here. So the important part of this here, Purdue goes to Minnesota next, comes home to play Northwestern, goes to Rutgers, who's really talented but really young, and then does that West Coast swing of Washington and Oregon. I believe I have that in the right order, all 5 of those games. You're set up here for no worse than 4-1, if not 5-0. Need to start racking up wins to get to the number you need to be at in March. Need to get off to a good start in Big Ten play, things like that, and need to build momentum again, and need to make sure that this 9-4 record at this point in time, as foreign a feeling as it must be to these guys who've known nothing but perfection in non-conference play, and including an NCAA tournament last year, aside from UConn, that this isn't something that throws their momentum off their upward trajectory, because they do have to get better, and discouragement or anything like that would not be a positive part of that mix. So that's what I got here from the John Wooden Room here in Mackey Arena following Purdue's. I stopped watching these games like 5 minutes ago, so I generally don't know the score. 83-64 win over Toledo. I will talk to you guys again following that game at Minnesota. I'm sure it will be lovely up in Minneapolis this time of year. So thank you to the Purdue Club Hotel once again for your support. It is profoundly appreciated. We will be looking for your Mall of America location when I go make a hotel reservation tomorrow. Thank you to the Purdue Club Hotel once again, and thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. What's the other one? Thank you for reading. The most important part. That was my job 20 years ago. The only thing that mattered 10 years ago. The only thing that mattered was reading, and that's now the one I forget. And thank you for processing our materials, however did you process our materials. And I will talk to you guys again here in a couple days. Thanks, everybody.